Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Tim Matthews. He's the VP of Marketing at Imperva, and he's also the author of The Professional Marketer. Tim, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to chat with you today, Tim. We're going to be talking about matching demand generation with sales capacity, which is a topic we haven't touched on before, so I'm really excited to dive into this with you. You've actually got a blog post that you wrote specifically about this, and so we're going to be talking our listeners through this idea and your thoughts on this. But before we do that, Tim, could you tell our listeners a little bit about Imperva, and then I'd also like for you to explain your book, The Professional Marketer, and what that book is all about as well.
Certainly. Imperva is a security software company. Long and the short of it is the bad guys look to break into websites and databases because that's where all of our credit card numbers, socials, and other information is hidden. So Imperva is in the business of keeping people out of your databases and from breaking into your websites.
Got it.
So that's the company part. The Professional Marketer, it's a handbook for marketers, and the idea came from my wife, actually, who's a former professional chef.
Nice.
And she went to the Culinary Institute of America, and their textbook is called The Professional Chef. And unlike most cookbooks, it doesn't give you a set of recipes, it gives you a set of techniques, and you put those techniques together to create pretty much any dish, at least in Western cuisine. And that's the idea with the Professional Marketer. That's not going to tell you exactly how to market for your company, but it's going to review all the fundamentals you need to know, and then you can put those together in the way that makes the most sense for your business.
I love it. That's great. So Tim, in talking about this particular topic, matching demand generation with sales capacity, let's start off by just talking to us about, why this is something that we need to pay attention to as marketers.
So most marketers know how to build a simple funnel model. Most do it on an annual basis. How much revenue do you have as your target for the year? How many leads do you need? But what I find is talking about it on an annual basis is not granular enough. And so what I recommend people do is, just like your sales teams have quarterly targets, you should have quarterly targets for your number of leads being passed to sales. So that's the first piece.
Got it.
The second piece is to make it even more granular. I like to report on demand on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So every week when I talk to my head of sales, I can let him or her know how I'm doing so far for the quarter.
Got it. Okay. So in going back to that first point, talking about really establishing your quarterly demand goals, Tim, can you walk through kind of what does it look like to establish those goals and talk us through what that process might look like?
Sure. So let's say your company revenue is, let's say you're doing really well, it's $100 million. Most companies don't do 25, 25, 25, 25, right? They probably ramp it up over the year.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe it's going to be 10, 20, 30, 40 or something like that.
Okay.
So that means that you're going to be feeding the sales team the number of leads they need for that quarter. Or if you generate demand, say a quarter in advance, you'll do that a quarter in advance. But you'll know exactly what they need. And another really important piece to this is you're giving them as much as they need and not too much or not too little. Sometimes marketers can either underserve a sales team or they can flood them with leads. And when you flood a sales team with leads, they typically go cold because the sales guys can't deal with them. So when you have a quarterly target, you're aligned with your head of sales and you're feeding the sales team as they need to be fed.
Got it. Okay. And so to establish what those goals look like, is it a matter of looking back at the last year and saying, okay, to track, if we're going to try to do, 20% more than we did last year, we just look at last year's numbers or is it more complex than that?
It can be complex, but what I like to do is when he's not going crazy in the middle of Q4, sit down with my head of sales and say, all right, what are we going to do next year? Is it going to be 20% growth, 30% growth? And I will create a pro forma plan for the following fiscal year. And then I'll get ready while he's closing out Q4. So by the time Q1 rolls around, I will already have begun some of the work and can review it with him or her to say, all right, it looks like we're going to do 20% more this year. We're probably going to have the same pattern where, for example, Q1 is going to be light because people are, just done back from the holidays. It's typically in the B2B world a lighter quarter, whereas Q4 tends to be the largest quarter for the year. So your quarterization, as we call it, the amount of revenue per quarter is probably going to look a lot like your previous years. And you just up the amount by the appropriate growth that your company, CEO or board or whoever has told you need to hit.
Got it. Okay. So this next piece that I want to talk with you about, Tim, is what you call the per rep demand model. Can you explain this to us?
Right. So despite what I just said, quite often what heads of sales will do is they will actually assign a quota target that is higher than the company revenue. So why would they do this? Well, not every rep is going to hit his or her quota. So most heads of sales will actually hedge by adding in 10 to 20% more for the quota targets for the sales guys. So in our example, if the company revenue is 100 million, they might build a quota plan of 120 million.
Okay.
That way, if some of the reps miss, there'll still be enough slack left where they can hit the 100 million target. So most experienced heads of sales will do that. And so this is important because if you only take the company revenue and build your lead model from that, you're going to be underserving the sales team. You need to figure out what each individual rep needs to hit and make sure every rep gets enough leads per quarter so they can be successful.
Got it.
Right. And this can be, and it can get more complicated. We don't really have time to get into it, but in some cases you have different kinds of reps. So mid-market reps and enterprise reps, certain geographies in the world have lower average selling prices. So you may have to compensate for that. But, in the simplest level, all you need to do is figure out what each rep's quota is and then multiply by the number of reps. And that's essentially your quota revenue target, so to speak.
Got it. How granular are you getting, as you're leading the marketing effort and the team that's responsible for putting these demand generation activities together that are ultimately going to drive these leads? If you've got some reps that, are more, they're mid-market, you've got other reps that are focused on the enterprise. Are you then taking what you know about the quotas of each of those particular reps and saying, okay, we need X number of demand generation activities that are going to produce this type of lead for this type of rep, or is that how that works?
So what I do currently is I have two flavors of rep. I have a mid-market rep and an enterprise rep. And the quota for the mid-market rep is smaller than the enterprise rep. So all I do is I add up all the mid-market reps and their quotas and all the enterprise reps and their quotas. And that's my quota revenue target, like I just mentioned before. You can get even fancier than that. You can figure out if they sell different products, you might need different demand generation programs. Like I said, if they work in a region of the world that typically has lower prices like India or China, you can try and compensate for that. I'm not quite there yet, but you can get that granular. Pretty much I would say go as far as you can without your head hurting, because you've got to feel comfortable with it, and you've got to communicate this to your head of sales and your CEO as well. But, you can get really detailed if you want to.
Got it. Okay. So this next piece that we're going to touch on here, Tim, is the last part of this is hiring new reps and then looking at annual planning. Right. As we were talking offline, you had quite a bit to say around this idea. Talk to us about what are the biggest things to know about hiring new reps and annual planning.
Right. So here's a problem I faced in the past. January comes around and we had a really good year, and the board wants us to hire a bunch more salespeople, which is great for the business. However, if you're not aware of that in the previous quarter, what will happen is you'll have 5, 10, 20 new sales reps, and you won't have had time to build up enough demand to feed those new reps. So one of two things happens. You either starve the new guys and they get effectively nothing until you catch up, or you dilute the pool by having the same number of leads and more reps, so everyone gets less, and then the experienced reps get mad at you because there's not enough for them to hit their quotas. So it's really important to start talking to the CEO and the head of sales, in Q4, if that's when you do your hiring in Q1, and say, what are you thinking next year? We're going to have flat headcount. We're going to have 10% more. That's one approach. The other approach is to ask them to phase in their hires as you can feed the new guys. Because if you don't do that, like I said, you're going to have either angry new reps or angry old reps, and you're going to become very unpopular.
So, Tim, this has been incredibly helpful. Is there anything else around this idea of matching demand generation with sales capacity that you think listeners should understand before I let you go today?
The one last thing I'd say is we talked at the beginning about reporting weekly, and I like to have a graph of a quarter, which is 13 weeks long, and I have my 100% target at the 13th week. And then I like to plot out how I'm doing week by week. So you can actually look at the leads week over week, and they should be pretty steady. What you don't want to have is a spiky demand where you're giving reps, all the leads in week 1 or all the leads in week 13. That's not going to help them very much. So you want to be as even as possible. And no one is that good to have a straight line, but you want to try and balance your programs so that they're getting fed a similar amount week over week to prevent the starvation issue or the overfeeding issue that we talked about.
Got it. Okay. When you're thinking about like the type of programs that don't cause the spikes, I'm just thinking for us, I know that when we do virtual events, that we have a massive spike in leads.
Yep.
And so what are some of the programs that you found that can be implemented either on an ongoing basis or things that don't cause the spike that you're saying we should avoid? Right.
So run rate programs, as I call them, are things like contact sales forms, people responding to offers on your website, pay-per-click, so Google AdWords, things like that. Those should be pretty well understood, and you should know how many you're going to get per week. When you've got the spiky programs, which tend to be, as you said, either events, whether virtual or live, maybe if you purchase a big list or do a big email blast, what you want to do there is if you have a lead qualification team, have them front-end the process and then meter out those leads on a more steady basis to the sales. And that's a way to effectively put a buffer in place to prevent those big spikes.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Tim, this has been incredibly helpful for me. I know our listeners are going to get a ton of value out of this as well. If there's somebody listening that wants to stay connected with you, how can they go about doing that? As well as if they want to learn more about Imperva or check out your book, how can they do that?
Sure. So if you want to read what I think, you can go to my blog, matthewsonmarketing.com. And if you want to find out more about Imperva, if you've got a website you're concerned about, it's Imperva, IMPERVA.com. And The Professional Marketer is on Amazon, so just Google The Professional Marketer Amazon, and you'll find it.
Love it. Awesome, Tim. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
To ensure that you never miss an episode of the B2B Growth Show, subscribe to the show on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device.
If you or someone you know would be an incredible guest for the B2B Growth Show, email me at jonathan@sweetfishmedia.com. Let us know. We love connecting with B2B executives, and we love sharing their wisdom and perspective with our audience.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.